Hello YouTube family, thanks for joining me on my videos. If you like the videos, please give me a like. If you've not subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel to help the channel grow. Thanks for watching the videos. Sincerely, thanks for watching. Hello YouTube family, thanks for joining me on this video. This is another video about the gun control debate, since that's one of the things that is going on right now. And it unfortunately probably will die off before too long because we don't really have that long of an attention span. Americans drop issues pretty quick. What I wanted to do in this video was ask the question about the term law-abiding. You'll hear it a lot in the gun control debate, the pro-gun advocacy, the gun control advocates arguing over what to do about the unfortunate, nonsensical gun violence deaths in the country, particularly the mass shootings, which we've had two very recent, very broadly discussed because they were so horrific. You had the shooting in Buffalo, which was a race-based incident, and then the shooting in Uvalde, Texas, which was not based on race. It was just one of these people who had things mentally go sideways for them, and they decided to take their angst out on, unfortunately, very young kids. You'll hear from the right and the left, you'll hear people talk about, they'll mention the term law-abiding. People on the right, politicians, right-wing media people, will say, you're just trying to take guns away from law-abiding gun owners. You're going to impinge on the freedoms of law-abiding gun owners. Even the Democrats, you'll hear it from them, saying, we don't want to take guns from the law-abiding gun owners. We don't want to decrease the access or freedom to law-abiding gun owners. And so I wanted to address that idea of a law-abiding gun owner, because I've known plenty of people through my life, between friends, acquaintances, family, people I went to school with, people I've worked with, who are gun owners, who seem to all identify themselves as law-abiding gun owners. And to break down the whole law-abiding gun owner thing, I figured the first thing to do would be to talk about the Second Amendment, because that's what everybody turns to in this discussion, is the Second Amendment. And if you know some right-wing person, family, friend, whoever, that is a very pro-gun person, you might see or hear from them the right-wing version of the Second Amendment, which is the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If you're listening to Fox News, Newsmax, OAN, any of the social media right-wing talkers, that's probably what you're going to get out of them from as far as the Second Amendment goes altogether. That the Second Amendment begins and ends with that one statement, that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And we will return to the question about law-abiding. I just want to go through this in my particular order. But the actual Second Amendment is not that. The actual Second Amendment is a complete sentence that involves more than just the right-wing idea of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment says, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And if you look at that, you will notice that that is one sentence. Everything there goes together. The Second Amendment is regarding a well-regulated militia. There's a reason for that. I'll talk about that in a second. And the right of the people to keep and bear arms goes back to the initial part, the first part of the sentence, which is a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. There's a reason why The well-regulated militia part is in the Second Amendment, but the Second Amendment is completely one sentence, and it pertains to a well-regulated militia. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed is completely pertaining to a well-regulated militia. When the Second Amendment was written, this country had militias. State by state, you had militias. In the instance of needing to defend the state, the country, the militia folks would come out and be used for defense. And there was debate over whether we have a standing army system for defense or whether we have a militia system for defense. If you read about the original history of this country, you will see that there was an overwhelming amount of support in Congress, the initial Congress that created the Constitution, that they wanted a militia system. They did not want a standing army. There's a reason for that. The first president of the United States, George Washington, wanted an army. As a matter of fact, George Washington sent not one, but I believe 2 letters to Congress, because he sent a letter, Congress did not act, asking them to put together an army for the document, so that there would be an actual army for defense. And he was perfectly all right with having a militia as well, but he wanted some type of trained, prepared, equipped army. And there were multiple reasons for that. Not just self-defense, but at the point they were making this document, we were starting to spread further and further west. As we spread further and further west, we were infringing upon Native American lands. As people would set up settlements, they could get attacked by Indians. We were setting up forts in order to defend settlements. And one of the things Washington wanted an army for was for defense in forts as we pushed westward and made the country larger, basically. But also for defense. That a ragtag group of militia is not necessarily going to always be able to fend off a well-equipped army that could land on the shores of America. I mean, at this point, they were worried about an invasion from England or France or Spain, one of the countries that had the type of ship capacity and soldier capacity to actually launch an invasion on the country. That was the fear as far as invasion goes. As far as Congress, they wanted a militia because they had a fear of military coups. At the time all this stuff was being created, it wasn't that difficult or that hard to see. And from where they came from in Europe, they had seen coups before, where a military officer would take a group of soldiers that followed them to the letter and try and take over government, take over territory. And that was their fear of a standing army. If we had a large, strong, well-trained, well-equipped, well-prepared standing army, that a rogue general could try and take over the country through a military coup. That's why the Congress members favored the militia system, because all the militia are people designated within states to be a part of the militia. And there definitely were people who were allowed to be in the militia and people who were not allowed to be in the militia. I mean, you had free blacks and enslaved blacks at the time, none of whom were allowed to be in a militia, none of whom were allowed to own firearms. Native Americans that lived within the colonies, of the states at this point, they weren't going to be allowed to own firearms as well. There were people within the original society that this document was created in who were not able to own firearms. And they certainly wanted, as it they put it in the document, a well-regulated militia, because they wanted the government to be able to regulate who could be in the militia, what types of weapons you could own, because you didn't have random farmers in the early days of America owning cannons, having them sit in a barn behind their house. We still had more serious weapons. We didn't. The variety of weapons at that time was highly limited, but there were weapons that the framers did not want in individual random people's possession. But I wanted to make the point that the Second Amendment that everybody talks so much about is one sentence, and it is completely and wholly regarding a well-regulated militia. And like I said, there's a reason why it was done that way. Congress wanted a militia system. George Washington wanted a standing army. In the end, after George Washington's second letter, and after he sent one of his cabinet members to address Congress directly, on the last day of their session, they put together a standing army. And they limited the number of people who could be in that army. And they tried to ensure limits on the military by putting the control of the military under the president. I'm sure anybody watching this video has heard, the President of the United States is the commander-in-chief of the military. But Congress, because of their fears, and that's why they wanted this militia system, they put funding of the military under congressional control. So the president controls military action, Congress controls military budgeting. And that was because of their fears of a standing army. That's most of what I wanted to talk about with the Second Amendment to start off this video. And I get it. Some of you will agree with me. Some of you will ardently not agree with me. What I'm saying is, to me, objective. This is absolutely true. The Second Amendment has to do with militia, not an individual's right to own firearms. Here is a breakdown explaining terms within the Second Amendment. Well-regulated militia refers to a government-organized force of citizen soldiers for defense of the state subject to a plan of organization, arms, and discipline. And this is just explaining the terms within the actual Second Amendment. Security of a free state refers to security against invasion, insurrection, and civil unrest for the protection of public liberty. The people that's referred to in here, under our complex federal system, the people has three meanings in the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, the people of each state, or individuals. Which meaning is in use is determined by the context. In the case of the people's right to keep and bear arms, it means the people as a collective represented by state legislatures, that is, the states. So in this Second Amendment, it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and it's referring to the people that are a collective of a state, because it is regarding a militia, and the states ran their militias. Keep and bear arms refers to maintaining and arming militia kept in military readiness for public defense. And then the shall not be infringed is another thing that people will point to, which is the end of the Second Amendment. And the pro-gun argument is any gun control infringes your right to keep and bear arms. And it says in the Second Amendment, it shall not be infringed. But there's the mistake. They're talking about individuals arguing about keeping bearing arms in the modern gun control debate. The Second Amendment is talking about a militia, and the people that it's referring to are the collective of a state that are part of a militia. But the shall not be infringed, it explains that this is a term of art for protecting sovereign or public rights, in contrast to the term abridged, which is used in the First Amendment. And it explains this is a term of art used in the First Amendment to protect individual or private rights. In the First Amendment, it is protecting individual and private rights for freedom of expression. In the Second Amendment, it's not talking about individual rights. It's talking about collective rights of a militia, the people being the militia. And like I said, I get it. Some of you will absolutely disagree with me, but that's the terms used. I'm just explaining the Second Amendment, breaking it down as simply as I can. That's where we are at the start of this, with just examining the Constitution. The Second Amendment is completely referring to militias. But here is a video to show the Republican argument in this.
The truth of the matter is these people are going to commit these horrifying crimes, whether they have to use another weapon to do it with. They're going to figure out a way to do it.
I can't assure the American people there's any
politicians try to politicize it. You see Democrats and a lot of folks in the media whose immediate solution is to try to restrict the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens.
And so you had a few Republicans, they're talking about the legislation that's being toyed with in Congress right now. You have the House that passed a gun control measure, and now it's being taken up in the Senate. And Lindsey Graham in that video had made the comment, I don't know if there's any legislation we can pass that'll end all these shootings. And that's the thing, people aren't talking about ending all the shootings. The reasonable left wing in this country understands there are too many guns in this country. There are too many guns in private ownership, and there's too many guns made every year and bought every year. You're not going to get rid of all the guns. You're not going to get rid of all. There's no ending of all the shootings. But this right-wing talking point to say, if we can't end them all, then why try to do anything? I mean, that's one of the BS maneuvers people will do to try and end debate on trying to pass common sense gun reform. They'll make the argument, if you can't end it all, then why bother? Or they'll make some blurred line argument of what is this going to stop? What is that going to stop? I mean, if we can decrease mass shootings and all the other gun deaths by 2%, 6%, 7.3%, that's better than doing nothing. If we can decrease the severity of mass shootings, it would be a positive, would it not? I mean, you had Marco Rubio on there saying if this guy didn't have the gun, he would have done it some other way. What was he going to do? Run through the school with a hammer and kill 21 people? Run through the school with a stapler and staple 21 people to death? I mean, the thing is, access to rapid-fire weapons, access to high-capacity magazines, access to insanely large amounts of ammunition, access to ridiculously large amounts of firearms. I mean, you could have somebody carrying a bag with firearms. You could have an AR-15 and 5 handguns, all of them loaded, and just go through unloading everything you've got to try and do as much damage as possible. I mean, we have too much of a free gun society, and that's the problem. The problem are the guns. They're too easy to access, too easy to own, and it's too easy to kill large numbers of people with them. if we had decades ago banned semi-automatic weapons, if we had banned handguns and we had made it legal to own rifles where you had to cock the rifle after each shot, and shotguns, and not semi-automatic shotguns, but single-shot shotguns or double-barrel shotguns, these killings wouldn't be as easy to accomplish. It doesn't take a genius to come to that conclusion, just a reasonable mind looking at it, that you can diminish the severity of these incidents by limiting the types of firearms people have access to. And that is one of the things that the gun control advocates want, is to limit some of the firearms that are getting into society. You have so many mass shootings in this country. Here is a website. And if you notice on the bottom of the screen, there's like 9 pages. That's just from this year. That's mass shootings from this year so far. 9 pages we've accumulated from this year. As far as school violence. And this is an old chart. I think this was 2018 or 2019. So this is several years old. But, I mean, as it says, 68% of school shooters got their weapons from relatives or their home. 73% of the school shooters had no prior arrests or criminal records. So, 73% of the school shooters were, until they shut up the school, law-abiding gun owners, or people who lived with law-abiding gun owners. And 81% of school shootings involved prior information. Somebody had prior warnings about a possible attack. I mean, we can decrease the amount of school shootings. We can decrease severity. And the thing is, in individual polls, when people just call around and poll people on this, it's overwhelming. This is old as well. I think this is 2019. But the numbers, they haven't changed. I mean, they've gone up. I mean, on this poll, support requiring universal background checks was 89%. It's hard to get 89% of the overall country to agree on anything. Now it's somewhere in the 96-97% range. It's gone up as we've experienced more and more of these senseless shootings, particularly the highly viewed mass shootings that get plastered all over the news. It's in the mid to high 90% range now, the support for universal background checks. Support for red flag laws. You're seeing that on this chart at 86%, most likely that's up as well. Support banning high-capacity magazines, not as high, but still 60%, well over half the country, supports banning high-capacity magazines, banning assault rifles. 56%, still over half the country. And support for mandatory assault weapon buyback programs, 52%. I mean, still over half the country. And if you looked at just registered Republicans on that, it would be much lower. It would be well below 52%, 56%, and 60%. But as far as the red flag laws and the universal background checks, it doesn't drop that far. Still, it's in the mid to high 70% range among registered Republicans who get polled on those questions. So as far as where we stand as a country, we support gun control laws. The problem is, our politicians, too many of them get paid bribe money by gun lobbyists. Here is a chart showing some of the countries in the world and mass shootings and deaths. And I mean, it is absurd among advanced nations how we struggle decrease this number for ourselves. Other advanced nations aren't struggling the way we are with this problem. And in Switzerland, I think Switzerland has a higher per capita gun ownership rate than we do, maybe. And they don't have any deaths. They don't have the mass shootings and the craziness with it. And again, showing the mass shootings versus other countries, other advanced countries in the world. And we, unfortunately, like in so many categories, come in dead last in that. I mean, it's absurd to me how bad we do at this particular thing. Around 1 in 3 U.S. adults own a firearm. In a recent news article, they were talking about how gun owners that do vocally support gun legislation are afraid to talk about it because they think that gun control advocates want to take all guns away. That's that absurd argument you hear over and over, particularly on the right. I mean, there are very ardent gun owners that are Democrat Party members. But the issue is this misconception that gun control advocates just want to take all guns away. And like I said in the last video I did on gun control, there has never been anyone propose any legislation to take all guns away. That's never been proposed. Nobody's ever talked about it. I mean, you had the most people can point to, and that's in recent history, is Beto O'Rourke when he was running for the Democrat nomination, and they asked him about taking, and he might have said it also when he was running for Senate in Texas against Ted Cruz, about taking guns away. And he said, hell yes, I want to take your guns away. I want to take away your AR-15s. And he wasn't wanting to take all guns away. He just wanted to take away assault weapons. But he's from El Paso, and El Paso had recently had that shooting at, I believe it was a Walmart, where a number of people were murdered in a mass shooting. And he was still bothered by that and having to deal with talking to the aggrieved family members. But one of the issues is, and this is because of propaganda, I mean, you had Ted Cruz in that video I played, that small clip, and it looked like the video screwed up a little bit. I don't know what happened with that. But you had Ted Cruz who claimed that, well, Democrats want to politicize it. Everybody's politicizing it. In your statement, Ted, you're politicizing it. And the thing is, this crazy notion gun owners have that gun control advocates want to take all guns away is because of politicization. That's what you hear on right-wing media from right-wing politicians, that they want to take your guns away. And what people are trying to do is to diminish these crazy shootings, to get some of our chart lines lower, like some of the other advanced countries in the world. It's absurd. In a Siegel study, you have fewer than 20% of gun owners are NRA members. The NRA, they're talking about how the NRA does not have as strong of a hold on people as some may think. That you have fewer than 20% of the gun owners in this country are NRA members. That still leaves millions of NRA members. And 10% of gun owners in that survey, on that Siegel study, say that guns are an important part of their identity. And they were saying that's a low percentage. Only 10% of the people in the study said that guns were an important part of their identity. But again, that's still millions of Americans who are saying that an important part of who they are is a gun owner. And so we have the bill that's going through Congress right now. I want to talk a little bit about it. And here's some of the things in the bill. It has support for state crisis intervention orders, funding of school safety resources, enhanced review process for buyers under the age of 21, penalties for straw purchasing. That's where someone who can legally purchase a gun purchases it for someone who cannot legally purchase a gun. And again, in the Kyle Rittenhouse incident in Kenosha, Wisconsin, he had someone straw purchase that gun for him that he ended up killing 2 people with. He couldn't legally purchase it, so he gave the money to a friend, and the friend purchased it for him. And you have a red flag provision investments to increase access to mental health and suicide prevention programs. You have funding to expand mental health and supportive services in schools, investments to help institute safety measures in primary and secondary schools, and gun control activists, including the March for Our Lives kids. Those are the Florida kids that experienced the mass shooting. Have voiced support for the congressional legislation. I mean, I just talked about how you have the gun owners who say they're afraid to speak up because they think the gun control people want to take all guns away. And here, in this, I mean, what they're passing in Congress, it's a baby step, a very baby step to try and work towards some type of gun control, some type of gun reform. But the gun control activists are like, yeah, I support it because it's been decades since we've had any kind of gun control. The last significant kind of gun control we had was the 1994 assault weapons ban that lasted for 10 years. And during that 10 years, what we saw was a decrease in mass shootings, because even though people who already owned assault weapons kept them in the ban, there weren't new sales from gun stores of assault weapons. And so it started limiting the supply going out in society. But so even with as small as what the Congress is doing, you have gun control activists still saying, yes, do it, because at this point we'll accept the baby steps. At least it's a step forward, not backward. And as far as the red flag laws are the laws where law enforcement can take guns away from people who have been deemed hazardous in society. That's, say, someone who's committed domestic violence, and they can have a gun taken away. Someone who's abused a child, someone who's committed some crime, and a court has deemed that they could be potentially hazardous to themselves or society. And a red flag law allows those people, if they're caught with guns, police can take the guns away from them. But what they're passing in Congress isn't nationwide. It only applies to states that already have red flag laws. And most of the states that have red flag laws are Democrat-controlled states. There's only 19 states and the District of Columbia that have red flag laws. So out of 50 states and the District of Columbia, you've got 19 states and the District of Columbia that have red flag laws. So less than half the country will be even affected by the red flag law portion of what they're passing in Congress. And that's why I say it is a baby step. And one of the things I want to do is put up a image of some firearms. Here are 3 weapons. One of these weapons is an M16. One of these weapons is an M4. And one of these weapons is an AR-15. And for the people who watch this video, I just want to ask if you can look at those weapons and tell me which is which. You're the top, the middle, and the bottom. Which is the M16? Which is the M4? Which is the AR-15? The whole purpose of this is that, as I said before, an assault weapon is a military-styled weapon that is rapid fire. That is, it is automatic. Many times as you can pull the trigger, a round's going to travel down the barrel. And the reason why AR-15s are so popular is because they are styled to look like the types of weapons that the military use. And I wanted to present them unlabeled for you to see if you could tell which one is which. The M16, when I was in the Army, that's what we were issued. The M4 is what people have in the military now. They were just starting to filter out into units as I was getting out. And so I never fired an M4. I never carried M4. I was never in a military unit where I was assigned an M4. And then the AR-15 is a civilian version of those weapons, basically. It is the gun that's made to look like military weapons. And I think I've dillied long enough for you to figure out if you can tell one from the other. And here's the labels of the weapons. The one at the top is the AR-15, the one in the middle is the M16, the bottom weapon is the M4. And somebody who's been in the military can really quickly identify them. I mean, for me, not having ever used the M4, I would identify it by the hand grip on it because it's very similar to the M16 hand grip. But as you can tell, the AR-15 is purposefully made to look like a military weapon because people think that's cool. If you, again, going back to Rittenhouse, you go back to the trial, and he was asked about why he wanted that weapon, and his answer was because it looked cool, because he was a 17-year-old kid. He was a dumb 17-year-old kid that wanted something cool. That was just an experiment in recognizing the weapons. But by all means, leave me a comment. If you easily recognized all the weapons, leave me a comment. If you were completely lost and I had no idea which one was which. I'm just curious as to how many people that watch this video recognize the weapons that easily. Because a lot of people aren't going to recognize which one's which. Won't tell one from the other. And so at the start of this video, I asked the question about law-abiding. Everybody talks about law-abiding gun owners. We're trying to not inconvenience law-abiding gun owners with the lives of people's kids. And that's what the question comes down to. Do you care more about your convenience and ease of access to buy guns, or do you care more about the lives of people in this country with you? I mean, for me, it's an easy answer. Guns don't matter when it comes to life. Life's way more important. And most people, I assume, would consider themselves law-abiding. I would say generally I'm a law-abiding citizen. And how do you divvy that up? If I speed on my way to work, am I no longer a law-abiding citizen? Or because that would be a civil citation, is that not really... You look at that as, well, that's not criminal, so that's not diminishing the law-abiding part at all. And why I talk about it in the terms of guns is I've heard so many gun owners, and like I said, nobody's trying to take your guns away. Even when we had the assault weapons ban in 1994, everybody who already owned assault weapons were grandfather claused in their weapons were not getting taken away. But you have so many of these right-wingers who absolutely up and down would call themselves law-abiding citizens, who would argue that you're just attacking law-abiding citizens with gun control, make statements that if Congress passed a law that required them to give up their guns to the government, that there will be blood in the streets. And the thing is, nobody's going to propose taking guns away from people forcibly because they know it would lead to massive amounts of violence. Whether you vote right, left, whatever, whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, you know if we passed a law, and as I'm going to make the assertion, it would be completely legal to pass a law that banned ownership of any firearms. Because we no longer have militias. We did away with that system. The Second Amendment can completely be tossed out because it pertains to militias. And we no longer have militias. Nowadays it's called the National Guard. Every state has National Guard forces. In addition to that, we also have a large standing military. Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard. We have a standing defense. And we still have state defense, which is the National Guard. And if we need so, we have reservists in addition to the National Guard. We don't use the militia system anymore. And so, to be perfectly, completely, logically sound, it would be absolutely, completely okay for Congress to pass a law that banned assault weapons. And they could say that nobody's grandfathered in. If you own an assault weapon, we're going to start a buyback program. You can take your assault weapon down to a local to a local police department, to a local courthouse. We will set up places where you can go, turn your assault weapon in, and they will give you the value for it, the money for it. And if you're caught with an assault weapon, you're violating the law. You'll be subject to arrest, and your weapon will be taken away. Politicians know, whether they're right-wing, left-wing, right-of-center corporate Democrats, they know if they tried some policy like that, it would lead to massive amounts of violence, because there are so many gun owners that call themselves law-abiding who would be willing to kill law enforcement people who came to their home to try and take guns away from them. And that's what I don't get, is the concept of calling yourself law-abiding at the same time simultaneously saying you would be willing to kill to keep from having to follow a law. That's why I asked the question about the law-abiding citizens. Are you really law-abiding if it's only on your terms? Are you really law-abiding if you're saying, as long as the law is convenient to me and what I believe, then I'm law-abiding? If it's not convenient to me and what I believe, then I'm not going to abide by it. But you still call yourself a law-abiding gun owner, a law-abiding citizen. And that's absolutely not true. If you're willing to kill to maintain possession of your firearms, you are not a law-abiding citizen. You are a criminal waiting for opportunity. And that's the thing I wanted to ask about in this video. I don't see this idea that I will kill people if they try and take my guns away because I'm a law-abiding citizen. You are not. And that's where I'll end. That's the close of this. I wanted to wrap it back up to that question of law-abiding. Feel free to leave me hate mail in the hate comments if you hate what I'm saying, completely disagree with what I'm saying. If you find some logical fracture in what I'm saying, then by all means let me know. But I've laid this out as clearly as I believe I can in this forum. But thanks for watching. Please, if you like the video, give me a like. Subscribe. Consider subscribing if you've not subscribed already. If you're somebody just happening into this video. And let me know how I'm doing in the comments. Leave me comments that is good, bad, agree, disagree. But by all means, quantify and qualify. What is it that I got wrong, you believe? But anyway, thanks for watching, and by all means, have a good day.